Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Morasso, and I want to welcome everybody on this call, this webinar, to what we're calling the Financial Freedom Crusade. And I want to start with a quote by Victor Hugo. And the quote goes, "There's something more powerful than all the armies of the world, and that's an idea whose time has come." And we truly believe that we have that idea whose time has come to help change and redirect the financial landscape of many Americans that are basically headed to retirement or have given up hope that they'll have anything significant in fulfilling their dreams towards retirement. But let me start by telling you what that really means to be financially free. What it means is to be completely debt free. And I'm not just talking about your credit cards or your student loans. I'm talking about all your debt, including your home mortgage. And that also means to have cash flowing that's completely free of income tax and also free of market risk, which means risk free. And when you add that all up, that means to retire with true financial freedom. But first, there are some roadblocks. And one of the biggest roadblocks that we hear over and over again is, what are we going to do as a nation with this national debt approaching $19 trillion now, growing at about $3.2 billion each and every day on top of our national debt? So the fact of the matter is, look, folks, there's nothing that you or I can personally do right this moment about the economic condition of our country, but there is something we can do about our personal debt, our mortgage, our credit cards, our auto loans. The reality is we're committing 40 cents or 40% of every dollar just to service the debt that basically makes up our lifestyle. We're financing our lifestyle, from the homes we live in, the cars we drive, the educations we choose to pursue. 40% out of every dollar is going to the bank in financing our lifestyle. So a visual perspective of that is, if you made $5,000 a month income, that means that $2,000 a month is going to the bank. And in 1 year, you've given out $24,000 of your hard-earned income to the bank. And in 10 years, you've paid $240,000, almost $250,000. And I'm here to tell you that most folks, in fact, the majority, are no closer to paying off all their debt, including their home mortgage. So that's $240,000 that you've given to the bank to basically be spinning or walking in place. So who's really in control of our income? Well, folks, if you're like many Americans, it's not you. It's perhaps the local bank on the corner. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what they're in the business to do. So what we need to do is we need to basically take some of those banking principles to where we can really think and operate like a bank. Now, the guy on the right here, Albert Einstein, one of the smartest men in our time, even though it looks like he's counting on his fingers right now, basically said the most powerful force in the universe is compound interest. In fact, he went on to say the person that understands it will earn it. The person that does not will pay it. So here's what we've been taught. Here's what we've been conditioned. The conventional way is we earn a paycheck, we earn a commission check, and we take that money and we go put it in our checking account at our local bank. And for that privilege, they give us a 0% rate of return. In other words, we're lending them money in which they give us nothing in interest, and then they use that like their own revolving line of credit to then lend it back to us in the form of credit cards, auto loans, and mortgages in the tune of 5 to 83%. Yeah, you heard that right, 83%. Because when we basically purchased a typical 30-year or 15-year or a 10-year closed-end amortized loan, our mortgage, if we're basically in that loan for 7 to 10 years, we're never paying 3, 4, 6%. We're paying close to 60 to 83%. There ought to be usury laws against that. So the idea is we want to teach these banking principles to you on this webinar so we can put those dollars back into your pocket instead of all those dollars going to the bank. That perhaps is why we have a savings crisis. People just aren't saving enough money. And according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute of 2012, from the ages of 25 to 34, the average saving is $6,300. Well, I can almost understand that because I remember what I was doing in my 20s and it wasn't saving money. But however, when we start to get into the older ages, 35 to 44, the average is 22,000. From 45 to 54, the average is 43,000. But what's even more alarming is that the average baby boomer, those that are hitting retirement right now, and I might add all at the same time, they're about $500,000 short according to USA Today. So the average, according to the Benefit Research Institute, is less than $70,000. Are these folks ready to retire? In fact, there's a presidential candidate that basically is saying that this is the largest generation of any generation heading into retirement, that it has the most debt that any generation has ever gone into retirement with. That's a travesty. And of course, when you add it all up, the debt crisis, the income and savings crisis equals the retirement crisis that is just now hitting our shores. And if you think about it, right now, every 7.2 seconds, a baby boomer is turning age 65. That's 10,800 a day, 4.2 million a year for the next 18 years. And they're all going to be applying for Social Security, Medicare, and withdrawing the money from the stock market. We are in for some turbulent times just with this age wave demographic hitting all at the same time. Where have they been putting their money? Well, the majority of Americans today are putting their money in government qualified plans. What am I talking about? 401ks in the workplace, IRAs, TSAs, TSPs, you name it, they're all qualified funds. You'll notice the Time article on the left basically shows the 401k underwater. Well, that was written October 19, 2009, when we had the mortgage meltdown and all of a sudden people lost more than half of their income. The Time article on the right-hand side was written a long time ago, and it said, will you ever be able to retire? With stocks plummeting and corporations in disarray, Americans' financial futures are in peril. Here's how to make the best of it. Well, right now, the stock market is an all-time high. Corporations have been doing quite well. However, in the future, this could all change very rapidly. So here's what the problem is. Right now, a lot of people didn't realize and still don't realize that their money is at risk. And the closer you get to retirement, the less you want to be on that roller coaster of life when it comes to your finances. So a lot of people need to find ways to minimize that risk. The next thing is the high fees. A lot of people don't even know that they've been getting charge fees in their IRAs and 401ks. Well, listen, there was a study done, the Demas report, and also backed up by Bloomberg studies, that the fees inside of 401ks, although the money managers on Wall Street were only, showing a half to a 1% fee, the reality is they were charging 3 to 4%. With just a 2% fee, mathematically, that could wipe out half of your profits. So Congress passed a law a couple of years back that said now that Wall Street has to start disclosing those fees. Well, that's good news unless you are unaware of that, and then of course you don't know to ask. The other problem persisting is the future high taxes that are probably going to hit this country very soon. So I'll go into that in a little bit, but let's see how this works. Well, when we basically think of what we're accomplishing here, what the value proposition here is this. What if you had a way to legally opt out of paying taxes on your retirement income, pay lower fees, and never lose money again? Would you want to know about that? Or better said, is what percentage of your retirement dollars would you like to have free of all income taxes? Well, if you ask me, I want 100%. But again, that can happen. You just need to know where to look. Here's what we're used to doing. We're used to putting money in these traditional qualified plans, IRAs, 401ks, and 403bs. And there's nothing wrong with this. This is a way that people have been accustomed to savings. We just don't know any different. There's an advantage when you put the money in because they're pre-tax dollars. They're deductible dollars. that's growing tax deferred. So when do you have to start paying the tax? Well, of course, when you start taking the money out. And if you were to take it out before retirement, not only do they tax you, but they're also going to penalize you 10%. Well, a lot of people don't realize that as they take the money out, that Uncle Sam's been waiting a long time to tax these dollars because they've never been taxed to this point. And a lot of folks well off enough to maybe not need these dollars right away. When they hit their 70.5 birthday, the government forces them to take that money out. Otherwise, they'll penalize them. So how do they force them? They penalize them 50%. So of course you're going to take the money out. And if you don't take it out by the time you pass away, when you pass away, the government could end up with 65 to 70% of those dollars with many American families today. So my question is do you want to have Uncle Sam to be your favorite son or daughter, your favorite beneficiaries? I would hope not. So what's the alternative? Like the Roth IRA, we basically want to tell you about the LISA account, the life insurance savings account. No, not the typical life insurance policies that your fathers or your grandparents bought, but this is a new type of policy. Actually, it really isn't new. It's just been previously undisclosed, but a lot of the wealthy have been doing this before the tax code of 1913. In fact, there's major well-known figures like Walt Disney built his empire, Ray Kroc built his empire, McDonald's, J.C. Penney, and on and on and on. In fact, many of the Wall Street bankers have been putting in close to $145 billion of their money basically into these accounts. And this is larger than all of their bank real estate and holdings. So how does this work? Like I said, like the Roth IRA, you don't get a tax deduction on the front end. You're contributing already taxed dollars. Then once it goes in there, it'll never be taxed again. It'll grow tax deferred. You could take it out anytime you want. And I might add, even without any penalties. And then, of course, you can transfer this to the next generation or whoever you name as beneficiaries completely income tax free. So here's the question. Would you rather be taxed on the seed now today, or would you rather the IRS just come back later on and tax your harvest in retirement? Here's what. It sounds dumb. Many Americans are saying to the IRS, don't tax my seed money going into my IRAs and 401ks. I want you to come back later on and tax my harvest, and please tax me at a higher rate. Because almost every thinking person in the United States really believes that taxes are not going to go down. They're probably, in fact, going to go up, and probably way up. Here's a book written by David McKnight called The Power of Zero. And this LISA account is actually known as an Index Universal Life Policy. And here's what the Comptroller General of the United States said, serving 11 years, the CPA of the United States said that according to the Congressional Budget Office, if Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid go unchanged, the rate for the lowest tax bracket would increase from 10 to 25, 25 to 63, and 34.9 would go to 88%. Wow. 88% of your dollars are going to be taxed. And if you have money sitting in these tax traps called IRAs or 401ks, that means that 100% of that money has never been taxed and is going to be subject to potentially higher taxes going forward. Now, here's the fallacy. A lot of people have said, or they've been taught, I'll be in a lower tax bracket when I retire. Now, if that's true, you failed. You don't have any money to be taxed. But if you have significant money that's sitting there for your retirement, you want it to be in a non-taxable position as opposed to a taxable position. So where do people invest their dollars? That's the vehicle. So where do people invest their dollars? Well, you could put money in the bank. You could put money in real estate. You could put money in stocks, or you could put money in gold or precious metals. Well, I want to tell everyone that I think these are all great investments until they're not. So real estate's good until it goes down. Then we basically put money in stocks. That's good until it goes down. And anytime we move that money, it's a taxable event. And when they're all bad, basically gold is going up. Our method is this. Our method is we can give you a higher fixed rate than the banks are giving, number one. Number two, your money is in an index strategy inside of this special Lisa account, where if the real estate market goes up, you get all of the gains and none of the losses except for a small 1.5% fee. So if you earn 21.5% this next year, you would earn 20%. And if the market then goes down, when everybody else is losing value, the worst you could make, the worst case scenario is 1/4%. It's the same with the stocks, the S&P index that we're utilizing. You get up to 13.5%, but if the market goes down, basically the worst you're going to do is 1/4%. Now, when they're all going down, gold is usually going up. So our accounts never go down, basically like the normal way that we would conventionally invest in these things, and our accounts are tax-free with living benefits, which I'll describe in just a minute. So the question is where would you rather be? So if we look back in history and look at what this has already done, from 1998 to the end of 2014, if you had your money basically with Wall Street, with mutual funds or money management in our IRAs and 401ks, you made money, you lost money, you made money, you lost money. And so from 1998 to 2014, if you had invested $100,000, you'd be at $167,000. With our index strategy, you're the blue line. Now, without explaining any of this, which would you rather have? Would you rather the blue line or the red line? You see, folks, you're not going to hear about the blue line from your employer. You're not going to hear about the blue line from Wall Street. You're not going to hear about it from your typical advisor because it's a specialized service in a specialized industry. And on that blue line, which are these Lisa accounts, you never lose money. When the market's going down, you basically are locking in the previous year's gains and you're not losing money. And then when the market goes back up like it did in 2002 after a major loss, you didn't have to start from a hole, you started from a gain. And like in 2008, when the market went down almost 50%, you didn't have to dig yourself out of a hole, you were starting from a gain. So you end up with, in this example, $376,000 as opposed to $167,000. And 376 on the blue line is tax-free distribution anytime you want. 167,000 on the red line is basically completely 100% taxable. So again, which would you prefer? You know, here's a very smart individual, one of the smartest investors of our time, one of the wealthiest people in the nation, the planet, Warren Buffett's 2 rules of investing. Rule number 1, never lose money. Guess what rule number 2 is? Sorry about that. Rule number 2, don't forget rule number 1. So Warren Buffett basically even stated that when he passes away, he doesn't want to have his wife basically manage these portfolios. He wants her, the family's money, to be invested in these index strategies. Even this gentleman, Tony Robbins, which many of you recognize, basically for the first time in 20 years writes a book. And he went about interviewing some of the wealthiest billionaires basically in this country. And they came to the conclusion that you should invest. Tony came to the conclusion you should invest like the wealthy, where you participate in market gains but are guaranteed to never lose when the market drops. Now, we're talking about, again, these life insurance savings account. And this isn't the typical insurance our parents or grandparents purchased, because these have living benefits. In other words, you don't have to die to get that small portion of the death benefit. If you live and get sick, they'll advance that money to you now. So if you have cancer, heart attack, or stroke, you can get up to 90% of that money when you need it the most. If you end up in a long-term care facility and you find yourself that you don't have a long-term care policy, like 90% of Americans don't because it's too expensive, or if you don't use it, you lose it, then you have an advantage now where you can have money that will act in your behalf to basically take care of those needs. And of course, we believe the best living benefit of all is to have an account, a wealth building tool where you don't lose money, you get market-like rate of returns, and you can have access to that money completely free of income tax, and whatever's left over that you don't spend during your lifetime, the rest of it goes income tax free to your benefit. All this is without any additional cost. So, here's the problem. 70% of the people that were diagnosed with heart attack, cancer, or stroke in this country, they didn't die. However, their bank accounts did. They had to go bankrupt. And you know what? I'm sensitive to this because my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer at the beginning of the year. And she's fine now. However, I really think about families that are unprepared. They don't have the finances to basically act on their behalf, because in the future, health insurance doesn't cover all of these expenses that we deal with. Who's going to pay your bills? The health insurance covers the doctor's bills and it covers the hospital, but who's going to pay your rent? Who's going to pay your mortgage? Who's going to take care of you when you can't work any longer? So these living benefits are going to help pay for those bills. See, what's worse than death is having a critical illness and have money fears. Less than 5% of American workers are covered basically with this type of benefit. Now, this is relatively new. It's just been in the last handful of years. Our agency had our first claim about 4 years ago. His name was Johnny. Johnny is 48 years old. He replaced a small life insurance policy he had with one that was less expensive, and he paid for it for about 4 to 5 months. And then he went to the doctor and he was diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer. So Johnny couldn't work anymore. He puts in a claim and he ended up getting 91% of his death benefit while he was sick when he needed it most. In other words, he got a check for $344,000 income tax free. Folks, his wife didn't work. They had 4 kids. He couldn't work. This made all the difference in the world to that family. So the bottom line, are you covered? Does the policies you have that are dusting in those file cabinets, are they the old kind that you have to die to get, or the new kind that have these living benefits? And then, of course, as long as you're buying these things, you might as well put your money into that for your retirement and get the best living benefit of all, tax-free earnings. But here's the biggest problem. The biggest problem is many people have been waiting to save. Now you would think that, if you started early, you'd have all the money in the world because you got that time for that money to grow, the time value of money. So if you wanted $5,000 a month in retirement and you started when you were 20 years old, all you'd have to save is $113.33 every single month, and you would have a nest egg, which would give you $5,000 a month in retirement. However, if you wait 10 years, you'll have to double down. Well, it's still almost doable, but look what happens when you turn 40. That's quadruple down, and when you turn 50 years old, you have to save $1,727.47 every single month for the next 15 years in order for you to have $5,000 a month in retirement. And look, when you're 60, it's too late. You can't save yourself out of this. So many folks are saying, I'm not going to be able to retire. Perhaps I'll have to wait till I'm 70 or 75 years old in order for that to happen. So the biggest question of all is, knowing that, where am I going to find the money? Well, folks, it's been sitting right underneath your roof this whole time. It's been sitting right underneath all those checks you've been sending the banks in which you're financing your lifestyle. In other words, for most people, it's the old saying, I owe, so it's off to work I go. Do you want to break the bonds of that financial debt that you have? Well, I want to tell you about the solution. The solution is myfinancialgps.info. That's our website. Go to that website. There's 3 videos on there. Get your questions answered, and we'll prepare a free financial analysis for you. Because at the end of this presentation, I'm just going to ask you one question. Would you like to see how this works for you? What this system does is this will help you eliminate all of your debt, including your mortgage, within 7 to 10 years. And I might add, without changing your income or your budget. It'll help immediately leverage your income to increase your household cash flow, which you can then redirect the interest savings from that debt into tax-free income. So what I would like to do right now is show you just a 5-minute video, a little bit an overview how this program works. So basically, enjoy.
Did you know that millions of Americans are overpaying their mortgages? And not by a little. by tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's right, and it's all in interest payments. The fact is, most Americans could be living the lives they've always dreamed of if they weren't spending the majority of their adult lives paying for the lives their lenders have dreamed of. In this video, we're going to show you how overpaying your mortgage is robbing you of the future you could have, and what you can do to stop paying for somebody else's dream and start turning your financial dreams into reality. So let's get started. Meet Bob and Katie Smith. The Smiths own their own home, and they're in a pretty typical mortgage situation for millions of homeowners across the U.S. Your individual mortgage details may differ from this example, but the financial principles remain the same. Bob and Katie have a 30-year mortgage for $200,000 at a 4.5% interest rate and a monthly payment of just over $1,000 per month. Bob feels like they're pretty lucky to get a 4.5% rate. I mean, that's a great deal, isn't it? Well, to answer that, let's take a closer look at that 4.5% interest rate. How much of the Smiths' payment every month is going toward interest, and how much is going toward principal? By the end of the first year, they've paid their lender more than $12,000. Of that, nearly $9,000 went toward interest. That means that over 73% of the money Bob and Katie paid their lender in year one went toward nothing but interest. That's 73% of their payments up in smoke. And in year two, it doesn't look much better. Once again, Bob and Katie paid their lender over $12,000, and of that, more than $8,700 went toward paying interest. That means that in year two, over 72% of the Smiths' money went toward nothing but interest. Now let's fast forward to year 20. By year 20, Bob and Katie have paid over $243,000, but they still owe their lender over $97,000 in principal on their loan. That means that after paying all that money, the Smiths still owe almost half the original amount they borrowed. And by year 30, the amount Bob and Katie have paid their lender totals almost $365,000, of which nearly $165,000 went toward paying nothing but interest. That means that they've paid their lender over 82% of the amount they originally borrowed, just in interest payments. That's 82%. Quite a far cry from the warm and fuzzy feeling the Smiths had when they heard they got a 4.5% loan. So where do all the billions and billions of dollars homeowners are paying the banks in interest go? Exactly. Homeowners like Bob and Katie from all across the nation spend their lives making interest payments to the banks and wonder why they never get ahead. But guess what? It doesn't have to be this way anymore. What would you say if someone told you that there is a simple online banking solution helping homeowners like you put an average of 18 years or more worth of mortgage payments back in their own pocket? How excited do you think people like Bob and Katie would be if instead of having to pay the bank over $164,000 in interest payments, they could pay less than $63,000, the same amount of interest they would pay if they had just a 1.9% fixed rate on their mortgage? That's nearly $102,000 in interest payments they would save, and their house would be paid off free and clear in just 12 years versus 30. Thanks to our online banking solution, Bob and Katie would be done making mortgage payments in just 12 years. What could you do with over 18 years of mortgage payments you no longer had to pay to the bank? Just imagine the possibilities. And you don't have to refinance. You don't have to change banks. You don't have to increase your minimum monthly payment. And you don't have to modify your mortgage or change your mortgage terms in any way. Just imagine the freedom you would have if you no longer had to make mortgage payments to anyone. Don't waste another
minute. And again, I want to reiterate, don't waste another minute. Continuing to pay these, monies that you don't need to pay. So let me do a brief recap. We call this interest accumulation. So in other words, a typical 30-year loan, in this example, $200,000 at 6%, I do this for easy math, is $11.99, and you're going to pay that same payment for the next 360 payments. There's a schedule. So you're going to pay a total of $431,677. So that's $231,000 in just interest that you paid. So in other words, you buy a house for you, and then you're buying a house for the bank. So here's what we call mortgage cancellation or interest cancellation. So in those 360 payments in your schedule, you'll have from month 1 all the way to 360. And your payment is made up of principal and interest payments. So month 1, the principal is $199 that you pay, and the interest you pay to the bank is $1,000. The next month, it basically goes up $1 towards your principal and $1 less towards the interest. So after 10 months, if you look at this, you've paid $1,856 towards your principal and almost $10,000 towards interest to the bank. Now think about this for a second. If you give that $1,856 to the bank in month 1, what you just did is you removed all of these payments right here going towards interest to the bank, which would save you $9,955. The next payment that you would make, the second payment, would now go to month 11, and the principal payment is $209 and $990 of interest to the bank. So what we want to do is we want to free up money so that you can cancel interest as quickly as possible in these loans so that you're not paying up to 82% like the video just described. So here's a thought. What if we could find $5,000, or even if we had to borrow $5,000, and here's even a really interesting thought. What if I had to borrow at 10% in a 10% account to basically pay off a 6% loan? Does that make sense? Well, conventional wisdom says no. But the reality is you're never paying, in this example, 6% on a 30-year amortized loan. You're paying close to 82%. And if you basically did this, you would eliminate 23 payments, and you would basically go from owing $231,000 interest to $203,000. That basically is a $28,000 savings minus the $5,000, which would mean that you would have a net savings of $23,304. So again, the question remains, what if I borrowed from Peter that cost me 10% to pay off a Paul mortgage interest loan? Does that make sense? Well, the normal credit card has a minimum payment of 1.2% on the balance. And if you have a home equity line of credit, that's just interest only. So if I took $5,000 at 10% interest, what would I pay just in the interest cost that first year? It's $50 a month. That means that first year I would pay $600 to basically save $23,000 in interest payments I no longer have to make. Even if it took me 5 years to pay off that $5,000, it would cost me $3,000. So is it worth spending $3,000 to save $23,304? You know what? A lot of times we look at what's the rate of return that we can get for our investments. This is by far the best rate of return that you can get just by paying down this type of debt or these type of loans. So again, recapping, after 1 year using our system, it's called offset bank accounting principles. In 1 year, compared to the conventional program, as you're doing right now, making those payments, you're going to, in that example, save or basically pay down an extra $12,732 than you would conventionally. That would take you 5.5 years to pay down that same amount of principal. So let me do the math. 5.5 years of paying $1,199.10, that means you would end up paying $79,140. With the $12,000 that we have now in that first year applied to our mortgage, minus that, that means that you've just made $66,408 in just that first year. So to make $66,408, That's a 522% rate of return. Where are you going to get that? Where else? That's like the biggest rate of return that you can get safely, and this is guaranteed using the system right here as applied. So when we look at the bottom line, you would be out of debt in this example in 10.4 years versus 30. Your total interest that you would have paid is 70,000 versus 231, and that puts $161,255 in your pocket instead of the bank's. And of course, if you redirected that into one of these Lisa accounts, you never have to worry about taxes going up in the future or the stock markets going up and down. So in summary, this truly is an idea whose time has come. And as long as people continue to mortgage their homes, accumulate debt, they need to earn income, they need to save money, and they've got their very own dreams and goals, our crusade has continued to march on. So here's the question. Would you like to see how this works for you? What's the next step? The next step is get back to the person who invited you to our presentation, get your questions answered, complete a confidential needs analysis, and we'll prepare a free financial debt analysis and retirement savings analysis, and that's how we're going to rebuild the American dream. Thank you guys for your attention, your time and attention. I know that's very valuable these days, and I promise you that if you align yourself with us, you'll be hearing about us at the neighborhood, some neighborhood next to you. Please get back to us and we'll help fulfill your dreams and goals as well. Thank you and God bless.